it's like lifting weights. If you want to max out, if you want to see how much you can lift, you have to go to failure, because unless you fail, you never hit the high point. And my fear in life is not failure. My fear is not achieving my as much as I could, not building as good of a company, not having as much impact as I could have.
This is the Construction Leading Edge podcast from constructionleadingedge.com and buildermasterclass.com. My name is Todd DeWalt. It's my job to help you, the construction business owner and leader, maximize profits and eliminate chaos. Got a great interview for you today with Eric Skott. He's the owner of Crestone Companies in Watertown, South Dakota, and here's what you're going to learn about in this episode. You'll learn about the benefits of getting out over your skis. We talk a lot about failure and how Eric thinks about failure. He's a guy who has faced it and is, frankly, pretty comfortable with it, and you'll learn more about that. You'll hear why Eric says you do need to practice. Eric talks about what branding means for a construction business. We also talk about how to find the fine line of pushing your team just enough without being reckless. Eric talks about specialization and when it makes sense not to specialize in a specific type of work. We talk about overhead creep and aggressive growth, lots of things. Eric's a really sharp guy who has a big vision that he is relentlessly executing on. I know this personally because I spent a few days with Eric and his team in South Dakota during a deep dive session a couple of years ago. He's the real deal, and you're going to learn a lot. So listen to Eric and take his advice. I have a couple of resources that I want to share with you before we get into that interview. LL Flooring is one of America's largest specialty retailers of hard surface flooring. They understand your floor is the foundation of your home style. That's why they offer over 400 floors, all at the best value, including Bella Wood hardwood floors, backed by a transferable 100-year warranty. Visit one of their over 400 stores to find the right hardwood, waterproof vinyl, laminate, bamboo, or tile flooring for your style. Their flooring experts will guide you every step of the way, from finding the perfect floor for your project to arranging safe, professional installation. LL Flooring has a variety of digital tools to help you transform your home. Use their Floor Finder tool to discover options for your project, and then use Picture It, their online visualizer, to see your new floor in your space before you install. For store locations, style advice, and more, visit llflooring.com/pro. These are the floors homes are built on. llflooring.com/pro. Let me ask you two questions. How many hours did you waste in the last month doing free estimates? And then how many profit bleeds, like rework, lost time, schedule delays, and even uncomfortable conversations have you had in the last month because of free estimates? Look, a growing number of builders, remodelers, and commercial general contractors are getting paid to do pre-construction planning and estimating. They're getting paid for their time. They're wasting less time, maybe even no time, with tire kickers. And they're cutting out a lot of the profit bleeds that are caused by free estimates. But what could I possibly say to a potential customer to get them to pay me for an estimate when everybody else does them for free? If you're wondering that, there are 3 specific questions that you can ask on your next appointment to get your prospect, and maybe even get yourself, to see that it's in their best interest to pay you for pre-construction services. Don't send out another free estimate until you learn these 3 questions. Go get your free training video with those 3 questions over at buildermasterclass.com/script. That's buildermasterclass.com/script. All right, here we go. This is my interview with Eric Skott of the Crestone Companies from Watertown, South Dakota. Enjoy. Eric, welcome to the podcast. How's it going this morning?
It's going great. Thanks for having me on, Todd. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Absolutely. So we've known each other a couple of years. Actually, I spent a couple of days with you out in Watertown, South Dakota, and I recognized this image on the Zoom call pretty well. We had a lot of these conversations, and we'll get into a lot of stuff, including failure, specialization, branding. But let's go back to before you started your business and talk about what kind of work you were doing before you got started on your own.
Sure. So I probably took an atypical path to construction, or at least, and you kind of loaded loaded the gun here. I have a hard time telling that story without telling almost my entire life story, and I have my mom's gift for making a short story long. So hopefully you and your listeners can bear with me. But I'll just start by saying that I've always had a penchant for construction. I've always loved it. As soon as I was 16 years old and I could get a job in construction, I went down the street. I applied for 3 jobs, and my neighbor hired me on the spot. So I went to work in construction. My dad was an auto mechanic, so I had some interest, and we raced cars, and I had some interest in race cars and cars in general. So I actually ended up going to school, and I was recruited by South Dakota School of Mines to play football. So I ended up going to South Dakota School of Mines. I got a mechanical engineering degree, and I had a couple different internships while I was there. And just never really found what I was looking for. Was never satisfied. Fortunately, when I graduated, it was 2001, and there was quite a bit of opportunity. The economy was clicking along. Everybody was hiring engineers, and so I had a lot of options. I actually took my lowest paying job offer, which was in with Washington Group International in Boise, Idaho, was where they were headquartered, and they stuck me in what they called the bullpen, doing basically quantity takeoffs for about 7 or 8 months. And it was, it was okay. I was learning, and it was fine. Spreadsheets, it was a lot of spreadsheets. But I had a hunger to get out in the field. And so they ended up sending me on what they called temporary duty. They sent me to a project in Denver, Colorado called E470, which was the bypass around the interstate by the airport there by DIA. And that was a joint venture between Washington Group International and Kiewit. And again, I was basically doing the same thing. I was excited to get in the field, and I was basically doing the same thing, except for I was in a dusty, dirty trailer, and instead of the 5th floor of a building in Boise, Idaho. And I enjoyed that, but I found myself one day they sent me out to hand out paychecks to these guys that were doing the concrete work, and it was like a 98-degree day. It wasn't Kentucky or South Dakota, so it wasn't quite as humid as it might be. But it was kind of a miserable day, stuff that most people wouldn't want to work in. And I found myself handing out these paychecks thinking, I'd much rather be over there doing that than handing these checks out and sitting in an air conditioned office, doing quantity takeoffs or checking time cards. So I did what probably most people wouldn't do, but I quit that job. Actually, that weekend I went to my uncle who was in Loveland, Colorado, 45 miles north. Asked him if he'd hire me. And so my uncle was a general contractor, did a lot of houses. They were building about 35, 40 houses a year. And then he had a framing crew with about 30 or 40 framers. I asked him if he'd hire me and to work on his framing crew because I wanted to get my hands dirty. I wanted to swing a hammer, and I've always enjoyed framing. Of course, he was pretty hesitant at first. He's like, "You're just graduated from engineering school less than a year ago. Your parents are going to kill me if I hire you to be a framer." But ultimately he offered me a job making $12 an hour, which was less than half of what I was making working for Washington Group International. No benefits, doing a job that probably most people don't desire, but enjoyed the heck out of it. I loved it. I'd help him in the evenings still doing quantity takeoffs, putting proposals together for him, really learning. And I've always been a little bit of an entrepreneur too. So, I knew eventually I was leaning towards, being owning my own construction business. And so, to bring my long story to an end, I found my way. I worked for him for about 5 years. My wife and I moved to Minneapolis, actually started my company in Minneapolis. Once she graduated a year later, she got a job in Watertown. My first job in Watertown, man, it's grown really organically. My first job was residing, reshingling a house for an ex-girlfriend from high school's family. And, I've grown that into what will hopefully be next year a $20 million company. And kind of worked my way out of the tool bags now and back into an engineering and project management job. But, I've loved every step of the way, and I still enjoy getting my hands dirty once in a while.
Yeah, I remember those days of working in estimating. I spent a few months working in the estimating department for a large commercial GC. And at the time, I just wanted to get out in the field because I'd been in the field as a project engineer, and then things slowed down and I went to into estimating. Actually, I thought they were going to fire me. That's what I thought. That was sort of the reverse career path at that company. And in fact, I they gave me my cubicle, and I found out that the person who sat in that cubicle before me got fired, and they had been on a similar career path. So I thought, oh man, this is not going well, Todd. And then one day the vice president called me into his office. Actually, I went in there to get a bid bond signed. He called me into his office and said, "Have a seat. I want to talk to you." I'm like, "Oh, here we go. I'm gonna go clean my desk out. This thing's gonna be over with." And he actually offered me a job to stay in estimating, which I turned down. And I didn't appreciate my time in estimating very much because I thought being out in the field was where it was supposed to be. But it turns out I learned a lot. I took a lot away from that. What were what was one of the biggest takeaways for you from spending time doing quantity takeoffs and doing a lot of things that people might not appreciate when they're in that position?
I've never really reflected on it, but I think one of the things that I probably learned um, from working for Washington Group, again, sitting up in the bullpen, they had a ton of estimators and senior estimators, and I was working on one bid that had a spreadsheet that was just an incredible spreadsheet, tons of pages long, whatever. And I remember they pulled the bid. They decided not to bid that project, and that was kind of frustrating. And then I learned that they had over $1 million into just bidding this project. And they decided to walk away for whatever reason, whether it was they determined it wasn't a fit, whether they just cut their losses because they didn't think they could get it. I don't even know what reason, but sometimes you got to walk away. Sometimes you got to say no. And I think that's a valuable lesson I still struggle with. When I started my career on my own, it was 2008, 2009. The economy had just collapsed. Housing was horrible. I'd moved back closer to home, but the if I didn't get, I mean, I think I had probably a 90 to 100% bid hit ratio, because if I didn't get the job that I bid, I didn't have work. So I come from a very hungry mentality. I hate to say no to anything, but we got to say no more now, because we get ourselves into trouble when we don't. And we either get overbooked, or we're doing projects that we shouldn't be doing that we can't make money at because it's outside of our area of expertise.
Yeah. And we're going to get into specialization or the lack of specialization. Your thoughts on that in just a few minutes. But I'm curious, since we're talking about saying no to work, how do you determine if something is outside your wheelhouse? If it's a little bit easier to know, if you're booked out 9 months and the job's got to be done in 6, that math is pretty easy. But when you could do it, but it's just, you don't feel like it's in your wheelhouse and you feel like you should say no for other reasons other than schedule, how do you think through that?
Really, for us, we tried to sit down and kind of put lines around what we will bid and what we won't, or what kind of jobs where we could easily just check some boxes and say, nope, we're not going to bid that one. But for us, it really came down to, and again, we'll get into this a little more later, but every project, every opportunity we actually evaluate. One of our best jobs that we've had was a really high margin general contracting job. And it was something that honestly, we probably didn't have any business getting into, but we looked at it. We said, okay, it's the old risk reward. It's like, okay, we're going to take a lot of risk here. Bid it high, and if we get it, we'll figure it out, and we cover our risk by making sure there's a high margin on it, so that if it does go backwards, and you try to estimate conservatively in those too. If you think it's going to take, this process should take 50 hours, then we're going to budget for 100 hours because we're not sure what we're going to get into. So for us, we really evaluate on a one by one. basis. We have learned some things that we're good at and some things that we're not good at. So, there's certain things we stay away from. But again, for us, and we're constantly growing. To me, doing something new is kind of exciting. Sometimes I push my team too far or set them up for failure because I'm not afraid to tackle anything. But at the end of the day, not everybody likes to fail as much as I do, and go through that struggle. I shouldn't say fail, but we all know. I mean, we learn from our failures. So, but anyways, that's our process is really one by one. Again, we've learned to stay away from, with our concrete crew we've learned that, flat work or I should say like slabs, house slabs, that type of thing, where it's got to be extremely flat is not necessarily our cup of tea. Civil concrete is where we really excel. So curb and gutter, parking lots, those types of things we really excel at. So we stay away from the structural concrete, the walls, those types of things. And we focus our efforts on getting that civil concrete work.
Gotcha. Let's talk about that tension between you as the business owner and your team. I'm convinced after working with and talking to a few hundred construction business owners, the contractor's mind is like a two-edged sword. It cuts in good ways and sometimes bad ways. Like one of the good things that one of the good ways it cuts is you're okay with failure. You're okay with taking risk. You've been through some pretty tough times and made it through. And talk about that, how that tension shows up between you and your team when you're okay taking risk and you find your team being on a different page.
Sure. I think I'd put it, the sword analogy is pretty good. I put it as live by the sword, die by the sword. And I haven't gotten to where I'm at, in basically 10 years or 15 years by not taking risks, not learning new things, not getting outside of my comfort zone or doing things I've never done before. Like I said, I started shingling a house and siding a house. And, so where the tension comes in, I think, is I'm used to that failure. And I look at it, another analogy I use is I always say I'm out over my skis a lot when I used to ski, and now I'm 40 and this is back when I was 20, but unless I had a garage sale or two skiing, I wasn't really having any fun. Never got injured. I could always get up and put my skis, find everything and go back down the hill again. So, but I've got one project manager, a guy that's really changed my life and really stepped up, took over a lot of things. Joe is his name, and he's been incredible. But he really doesn't like to get out over his skis. He doesn't like the pain. When I talk about failure, especially on a job, I mean, we've failed to make money at jobs, or we've had to go through pain or do rework to produce a quality product. But that he likes to succeed. He's used to doing a great job. So he kind of needs me to slow down, and I'm always like pushing him, hey, take on that job. Hey, we can do that job. I think we can do it. And sometimes he has to rein me in and say, and I push him hard. I make him prove to me we can't do a job or really question him. And sometimes he's right and sometimes I'm right. So, but a lot of times, one thing I've learned to do too is to talk to our team from, if the concrete crew, if we want to take on something that's a little bit different or a little bit new, we're going to bring our foreman in. We're going to have him talk to his team. We're going to find out what their opinion is. We're going to find out if they want to take it on. Because if they're ready, willing, and able to tackle it, knowing it's going to be a challenge, they're less willing to walk away when things don't go quite right. So.
Yeah, it's always good to get their buy-in rather than try to shove something or make them feel like something's being shoved down their throat.
Right.
Let's talk about that tendency, or that it sounds like you're comfortable being uncomfortable. You tend to push yourself, get yourself into situations where you're in over your skis. I did a podcast sometime in the last couple of years about the death ground strategy. It comes straight from the Art of War from Sun Tzu. He talks about if you want your soldiers to fight at optimum levels, they have to be on desperate ground or death ground when failure is really painful. Do you find yourself putting your team, are you intentionally stretching your team and putting them in tough situations, or intentionally putting yourself in tough situations, or is this just kind of a habit of yours? What do you think?
Uh, I'd say it's probably maybe more of a habit than intentionally saying. I mean, it's a conscious choice too to challenge them, to say I'm not afraid to challenge them, and I'm not. When we have that talk once in a while, like, or when there is a failure and everybody needs a little bit of a pep talk, is we talk about, hey, this one didn't quite go right. We didn't make any money, or we had to do some rework or whatever it is, but that's part of the learning experience. So now we learn, now we know what's acceptable, not what's not acceptable. We've picked up some skills along the way, hopefully, and then we make money on the next one. So I'd say it is intentional. I'm not afraid to push them, and I think we all feel nobody likes getting pushed outside of their comfort zone, but um, at least not in the moment, right? But whenever we reflect on it, we're like, we've all had a good coach, or we've had somebody. We had a meeting with all my leaders, so my foreman and my superintendents, and we asked, I think, who the most influential person in their life was, and at least half the guys, probably more, said my dad, and he made me get out of bed and work on Saturday mornings, or he pushed me to do this, or whatever it was. Well, I guarantee back in the moment they didn't say, "Gee, I'm so glad my dad makes me get up and go to work." Um, but when you reflect on it, those are the things that we know that grew us as a person and the things we appreciate. So I'm not afraid to push them in that regard, and then that is a choice that I'm not going to hold back. On the flip side, it's to know when to quit pushing in order to say, you know what, yeah, you're right. We that job's over our head. A good example is that Two Willow Creek, as apartment building we built, had underground parking with some precast concrete, and we'd never done precast concrete before, and we decided to set it ourselves with our crew, and it went great. We made good money at it. The job went well. We were on site, so that's always a benefit. And we're doing another project right now that has some underground parking. And I was really pushing Joe and my team that we could set this precast concrete. We've done it before. It can't be that much different. Well, this one has 30-foot walls. And after, thankfully, Joe pushing back on me, my project manager pushing back on me for a few weeks, saying, I really don't think we should do it. I called, and then I called the precast company. I made a couple other phone calls to say, and ultimately other people were advising me, okay, this isn't quite like that job. You need another crew to come in and do this one. You don't want to do this with a not seasoned crew. So, so then it was learning when to either at least listen, do some more research, or just back off and say, hey, okay, I trust you. And sometimes that's probably one of my biggest struggles right now too. And um, I feel like I'm either too involved or I'm not enough involved. I haven't figured out how to be, as a leader of our team and trying to be out in the forefront, um, how to find that middle ground where I'm not involved and not engaged with my team, but I'm not in telling them what we can and can't do. Because honestly, I probably shouldn't have even been in the conversation.
Mm. So let's talk about that a little bit. This is a struggle for a lot of people. They want to grow their team, but they want to stay on that, what feels like this razor's edge, fine line, middle ground, where they're not too involved, but they're not aloof. What are some indicators that you are too involved? What are some red flags or warning signs that you can look back on and say, I was too involved in that situation, or things that you look for now to tell you that you're too involved?
I think the nice part, I'd say for the most part, my team I trust them and they trust me that I'm not going to get mad at them, or they'll tell me, hopefully they tell me when they need me or they tell me when they don't need me. So I think that's a big part of it, is building that trust to where, and then sometimes I wish they'd say, sometimes it doesn't always come as a direct, like, hey, I don't need you, butt out, which is, that I might emotionally not handle well in the moment, but they'll joke when I was quarantined. My daughter had COVID. She's doing fine, but I was quarantined for 14 days. So everybody was like celebrating because Eric's out of the office and they can get more done. I'm not going to meddle in their business essentially. So it comes in little jibes or little jokes like that. But, that makes me reflect and think, okay, I need to be aware of that they get a lot done without me getting involved. And sometimes when I start meddling, I just get in the way. So kind of staying out of the way. The hard part is knowing when I'm not involved enough, because on the same end, I can get, some feedback or some pushback. Again, you kind of got to read the signals, but of when they expect me to get involved in something and I'm not getting involved, or even for me, a lot of times it's just feeling disengaged. Sometimes I feel like I don't know what's going on out there, but at the end of the day, how much do you need to know? So daily reports, we've been doing daily reports in Procore, and as we've gotten our team used to doing those, I feel a lot more engaged just because I can see what's happening out in the field without, we're too big for me to go to every job site every week, and we got too much going on. So that's been good as far as staying engaged. And sometimes you can see something where you can troubleshoot something and ask a question. Chain of command's been a big one. That's one that you helped with us too. So it's not me calling the superintendent and saying, hey, what's wrong with that? It's me talking to the project manager, and me also having to follow the chain of command. So.
Yeah, I remember when I spent a couple of days with you guys, you had grown so much that the chain of communication hadn't quite adjusted yet, and there was just information flying everywhere. And yeah, that glad to hear that streamlined things a little bit. All right, let's talk about failure. How has we'll ask a couple of questions about this. How has a failure or apparent failure set you up for later success?
I just think that you can't grow unless you fail. I look at it. I mean, a simple analogy for me is sometimes I look at it, and the trick is to not fail so big that you can't recover from it. And I've been close to that point a time or two, but it's like lifting weights. If you want to max out, if you want to see how much you can lift, you have to go to failure, because unless you fail, you never hit the high point. And my fear in life is not failure. My fear is not achieving my as much as I could, not building as good of a company, not having as much impact as I could have. So I fail all the time. I fail in every way. That the trick to me, I think, is to try to make the failure small, not get so far out over your skis that, or get in on the wrong run and break your neck or run into a tree, right? If we use the skiing analogy, but I think you gotta always push the envelope. I mean, Two Little Creek is one where, yeah, we failed. If some things had gone right for us on that project, we maybe wouldn't have failed if we could have adhered to the plan, but there was some circumstances outside of our control that we had to overcome. There were some things under our control, but through that project, we built a name for ourselves. We kept our reputation. Great relationship with that developer owner. So we're still doing a lot more work for him. He's a business partner on several projects right now that I'm also developing with him as a co-developer. And that supposed failure, or seemingly what we would look at as a failure, if all we looked at was the money, was actually, a success. It was a brick. It was a foundation stone that helped us build what we built. And we really have an expertise in our area of the guys to go to for condominiums, apartments, those types of projects. And that project was really kind of brought us to that next level.
So I think a lot of people use money as an indicator of success or failure, but what do you think is a better, or is there a better indicator for success or failure in business? How do you classify something as a failure if it's not just financial?
Cool. Excuse me. So I think, how do I classify something as a failure if I don't classify money as a failure? Our mission statement, we recently changed. It used to be to build community with each and every job. So in 2018, we had a rough year. We didn't make any money. That one job, we we got tied up with the framing crew. We were supposed to have some support for another framing crew, and if they'd have come in, it would have helped things. But we just really didn't have the right personnel in place. So that's really what caused us to not make money. But when I look at it, we still built, I think we built a church that year. We built an apartment building. We built a restaurant. We built community. We did good things for our community. All of my employees made money. They made a living, and we learned. I built a great reputation. I still believe you got to pay tuition. And, that one, I paid tuition. I have a lot of, around here, a lot of the contractors will say if a job that's not going to make money, or if it's not a high revenue job, or they'll say, well, I don't need the practice, right? Well, I'm of the mindset, Kobe Bryant practiced more than anybody. These guys, if you're going to be the best in your field, you got to practice every day. You got to be constantly learning, constantly getting better. So, that's where I wouldn't consider that a failure. Part of it is just an optimistic outlook, because whatever's behind me, I'm going to put behind me, try to learn from it. And so that's why I never, considered a failure. We failed to make money. We didn't fail to achieve our mission. I think part of it, and one thing we've done with our team and even our whole company at points, is putting together that mission statement and that value statement, and being grounded and centered around that. When I looked at that, and after that year, I did a lot of reflecting and deciding, what to do, how to move forward. I was worried about banking relationships, bonding, a lot of things, because we did have such a poor year. And at the end of the day, I could look at it and I could be proud and I could be happy that we achieved our mission. Now we recently changed our value or our mission statement to building community, building your experience. So we've added to that. We want to make sure, first of all, our clients have a great experience. But we want I really look at it as like I'm in the middle trying to make everybody happy. I want to make sure my employees have a great experience working here and they go home safe. I want to make sure our community, the neighbors, have a great experience. I want to make sure our subcontractor and our vendors have a great experience, that we're organized, that we're clean, that they can come to our job sites and make money, and that they want to work for us. And so I'm trying to make all these happy, right? And people happy. And I think in our field, a lot of times as a general contractor, you're trying to, you're going to try to tell your client that, well, I really beat up on my subcontractor, right, to get the best price I could. Well, our goal is to get the best price for you that we can and provide the most value. But I don't like that term, beating up on them, because that's not our goal. Our goal isn't to beat up on them. And I believe everybody should make money or achieve their goal on this project. I believe in common goals and that type of thing.
Yeah. So make the pie bigger instead of trying to, one of the terms that I never liked, there was a client rep that I worked with, and every time a bid came in, he would use this term, let's take another bite of the apple. And it was always squeezing trades down, really a short-term mindset. Like let's try to stick it to the trades, the subs on this job, not even thinking about the long-term relationship, and then really expecting the general contractor to beat up their trade partners on one job. And that's just a really short-term game that doesn't work, doesn't play well.
Yeah. Well, they're smart people. They're going to learn that. And then on the next job, if they know you're going to beat them up for 5%, 10%, whatever it is, if they know you're going to try to find a way to take another bite of the apple, so to speak, they're going to bid it a little higher, right? Or they're going to quit bidding your work. Or when you get busy, I mean, right now in our area, the economy is so hot that we got to really, it's honestly been that way my whole career. We have a trade shortage. I know you talk a lot on that, but at the end of the day, almost everybody has a hard time getting the work done that they could complete. And you want to make sure these guys want to work for you, because at the end of the day, they can say, you know what, we don't want to bid your project. We don't like working with you.
Right. Yeah. It's like where the economy is right now, good subcontractors are good. Any skilled labor, they can go work wherever they want to. And if the money's the same, they're going to work where they can get the best experience.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of general contractors are coming around to that idea, that old school mentality of you need me, more than I need you. I can go find somebody else. Those days are long gone. And the GCs who are thinking, like you are, I need to provide a good experience for my subcontractors as well as my clients. That I think that's going to be the key to success. Let's talk about branding. This is a term that a lot of people throw around, but I don't think a lot of contractors spend a lot of time on it. But what does that mean? What does the term branding mean for you and your companies?
I think, well, so the simplest way to put it to me, branding means when people hear Crestone Builders for me, what do they think of in their mind, right? So what do they think of when they hear your name? Now, the branding part of that, or where the hard, you have to paint that picture for them. That's where the branding comes in. It's sending that message, you know, in all of your in literature, in advertising, in the way your job sites look, building a brand and doing marketing around that branding effort. So you want to paint a picture of a consistent company, or for us, we want to look professional. We want people to think we're consistent, clean. A lot of times I've heard, and I feel like you can even drive around town, and even there's jobs that we've designed and jobs that we're part of the design team, and jobs we haven't designed. But some people, you said you can tell a Crestone building and just has a certain look or a certain feel about it. Well, that's a little bit of accidental branding and a little bit of intentional branding, but that's the simple version, I guess, of what branding means to me, is what people think of when they think of your company or your name, when they hear your name.
Yeah. And how does branding connect to the boots on the ground? Actually, on the job site with your frontline people, subcontractors and employees, how does that branding trickle down to them when they think, all right, I want to be consistent with the Crestone brand? What should they be doing in your mind to be consistent with your brand?
Sometimes we struggle with that a little bit, but again, we talk every day, all the time, about job site cleanliness. We want people to think about when they come on or when they drive by and see a Crestone job, they think that's a nice, neat, clean job. Just keeping a job clean, not only is it safer, people driving by have a better picture of your company if your job site is nice and tidy and clean. That's just the people driving by on the road. So that's something we talk about a lot, and it's a struggle. God bless these guys. They go out, they want to get work done, and they're not worried about being neat and tidy all the time. And honestly, when I was in the field, I was pushing hard every day to get as much work done as I could, and my jobs weren't always neat and tidy. My office is not neat and tidy either, but as you can see, all the papers and everything laying around on the desk. But that is a big part of branding, and that's one thing we try to get them to do to stay consistent with the branding. PPE and wearing hard hats, safety colors, that type of thing. And again, we struggle with this, we don't do it perfectly, but when you drive by a job site or you think of an image, you close your eyes, you think of an image of your mind of a construction professional, you probably see a guy with a hard hat and a safety vest on. You don't see, a bushy guy with torn jeans and a greasy hat. And so, that's one thing we try to do, is make sure we're wearing our safety colors, we wear hard hats when appropriate, and we try to have that presence on a job site.
All right. So that's a good way to think about branding. Let's talk about your thoughts on specialization. Some people would say you really need to niche down and you need to have a pretty narrow focus of specialization. Some people would say, I'm a general contractor, I need to do anything and everything that comes to me. What are your thoughts on specialization?
Yeah, it's a struggle. Again, I think it's kind of like we talked about with failures and staying true to who your core is. For us, I mean, that's part of who we are. We're a solution-oriented company. We're willing to dive in and figure out solutions, unique solutions to complex problems is what I like to say. But so, and we're in a small market. Watertown's 25,000 people. Sioux Falls is the biggest city in the entire state, and that's a small town by most people's standards, right? It's 300,000 people. So and we really don't get into that market. So point being, we have to be adaptable and open to taking on new challenges or learning new things. We're not just going to build restaurants and be successful in Watertown and be able to grow the way we want to grow. So I started out in housing. So for us, what that means for us is we look at every job, we take on challenges. If we think we can be successful at it, we're going to go ahead and bid it. And we had to get outside of our market too. So we travel within 100 miles or so, even further at times for clients that we've done work with. But so for us, I mean, I think it's for the company that's not the right answer for everybody. If you're a concrete company and all you like to do is flat work, or all you like to do is foundation walls, there's probably enough business out there or a trade partner that you can even partner with to bid jobs together that allow you to do what you're good at and what you enjoy doing. My team has to take on some of my personality because I'm going to push them to, and because that's, I think, just the way it works. So, but what we have learned too. So our company, we are general contractors, construction managers. We do development, we do carpentry, we do concrete work. And we also build pretty unique. We build homes, and we build, we do pretty much anything commercial construction wise as far as the general contractor. So this goes back into the branding piece for us. It got to the point now where we're big enough, and I hired a vice president of marketing. And as he talked to people in the community, he found out like one or two people said, "Oh, I think they're landscapers, right?" And I'm like, "Okay, something's wrong here." And even talking to him when he was doing his research to see whether he wanted to come to work for us, he put me in a competitive set with a bunch of home builders, or a couple home builders that great builders, and I do compete with them, but at the same time, I compete with Great Construction, who's the big commercial contractor in town. And so it just became evident that we needed to do a rebranding because people didn't really understand what we did here, or the full breadth of what we did. So this goes to the marketing branding piece of it too. So we rebranded into Crestone, from Crestone Builders into Crestone Companies. And Crestone Companies consists of Crestone Development, which is our real estate and development arm, Crestone Builders, which is our commercial construction arm, and that houses our field services, which we primarily do now. Learning where we specialize is we just do civil concrete. We don't do foundations. We don't do the flat work for the home. We might do the driveway, but we stay out of those other two things, and we basically focus on civil concrete. And then we do like framing or miscellaneous construction. As a general contractor, you got to have some guys that'll do anything, whether it's selective demolition or installing a little steel or what have you. So and then we have Crestone Homes as well, which is just our home building division. So so we launched that rebranding campaign about 6 months ago, and it's been very successful, and I think it's really helped the community and people in the community understand what we do, or at least leads to some questions, right? And that's really what you want. You want people to engage you, and then you can start to tell your story. So.
Yeah, you have an interesting blend of work, but it makes sense based on your geography to build the company that you want to build. There's probably not enough of just one of those types of work to get where you want to be. Let's talk about home building for a minute. Here we are recording this in early December 2020. Spent the last 8 months, I guess, in a pandemic, and lumber prices have skyrocketed. There's a housing shortage, according to a lot of the experts that I see. What are you going to focus on in your home building business in 2021? For example, are you going to build single family? Are you building custom, multifamily? What do you see as the opportunity in the home building business?
So right now we're trying to build out our system so we can kind of take it as it comes. We've had incredible demand, and with that comes growing pains again. um, and so trying to build out systems and build out the team and get that team experience so that they can meet the demands and make sure our customers have a good experience. I actually had a project manager, and I'm maybe getting off track a little bit, but kind of an interesting side note. I had a project manager that our custody it wasn't working out. I put him in a situation where I knew he was going to have to grow and succeed. We'd done probably 4 or 5 houses at a time at the very most in the past, and all of a sudden we had 14 houses going. And I ended up having to terminate him and move on just because he wasn't going to be able to get up to speed fast enough, and we had to get things right for our customers and our vendors. Nobody was having a good experience. So we actually moved a gal that I hired to help me in my real estate business, Tracy, and we gave her the title of CXO, which is Chief Experience Officer. And so she's a systems specialist, great customer service, worked for a real estate company previously. And she came in and she's really helping us build out those systems. We found another project manager and we're kind of transferring to him. So where we've been successful right now is we're in a couple communities doing what I would call like semi-custom homes. We have a few floor plans. We are doing a few custom homes. But we really want to work towards, we want to continue to do that, make sure we can do it well. And then as everybody, I think, is trying to solve the affordable housing conundrum, that's where I'd really like to get to where we can do 20 houses at a time or 20 houses a year that are 200, somewhere in that neighborhood of 200,000 and really kind of dial that in. So to answer your question shortly, I think it's building in the communities we're already building in. And those are custom to semi-custom homes, and then figuring out basically a kind of a track home plan.
Any panelization or modularization in your plans?
So we've been contemplating that. I think that's the future of construction. Honestly, that's probably the what we call modularization. I see probably being more so in apartments types of things. A hotel recently went up in town that was modularized by a company here in town that builds those boxes. And so that's where we're going. We haven't got there yet, or we haven't done a project yet, but we intend to. I'd put it that way. On the homes, we probably use more panelization in multifamily stuff. That's where we're not using boxes yet, but we're using panels. On our homes, we have panelized stuff ourselves in the shop. We're subbing most of our stuff out now, and our framer doesn't like panels. He likes to show up in frame. An interesting one, we have worked on a job or two now where it's kind of a hybrid of panelization. The lumber company will basically, they'll run everything through their system, which they can panelize walls, but they'll ship out, like, all the headers are cut and built, all of your plates are cut and laid out, everything. So it just shows up as a kit, and then you assemble it on site. And one of our framers is telling us that it saves them quite a bit of time, maybe 25% when they show up to frame a house or, a smaller multifamily job like an eightplex or twin. So
yeah, that's an interesting in-between model, somewhere between stick-built on-site and panelization. Yeah, makes sense. Good stuff. All right, let's talk about some advice. What advice would you give to a smart-driven high school student who's about to enter the construction industry?
I would say the best advice I have for any high school student, I think, is, and I just remember where I was at when I was 18, and it was December, and I was going to graduate in May. And I thought, man, I got to decide what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. Like now, I got to decide. And that was a lot of pressure, right? And so then I go on this path, and I love where I'm at, and I love the adventure, and I love the journey. It's been great. Just pick something, do it, do the best job of it that you can, and learn something along the way, even if it's a miserable experience and you don't like it. Do your best, learn something, and then, figure out where you want to be. I had a gentleman when I worked for Cargill, which is a big agricultural company. I worked at a soybean processing plant, and one of the one of the gentlemen there that was actually corporate, he didn't work in Des Moines, Iowa, where I worked, but he was at a conference I was at. And he told me and a group of us interns that were there, you know, you got to find something that you like, you enjoy, or that you're passionate about. And I think that has stuck with me to this day too. And the reason I made a choice to go from making $45,000 a year plus great benefits in a nice air conditioned office to going and framing houses, because I want to get my hands dirty. And I've been successful because I'm passionate and I love to build. That's what I was called to do, you know. So the two pieces of advice: don't take it, you know, don't get too stressed out about what you got to do for the rest of your life. Pick something, see if you can enjoy it. You can always, you know, pick another path or take a turn, and then find something you're passionate about and do your best. Work hard. I think that's number one. Work hard and do the best job you can, no matter what you're doing.
Yeah, it's true. I think a lot of times we get on a path that we think we should be on for some reason, and we do what we should do, and we ignore that thing you talked about being this calling that we have. If you would talk about that a little bit, when you say you were called to build, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I don't know. I just look at it from the time when I was a teenager and I just wanted to go get a construction job. I don't know what called me to go, you know, to want to get into construction. And then, you know, I took the adventure. I explored some different things. I got a mechanical engineering degree. Um, you know, I still have classmates that are probably I built a successful company. I don't pay myself a lot of money. I don't have, you know, a lot of fancy stuff or whatever. By a lot of standards, those people, I could have been more successful by a lot of people's standards if I would have just followed that mechanical engineering route. I'm an entrepreneur, but I look at the margins we make in this construction business and the amount of risk we take and the amount of stress and pressure it is. And I'm like, man, there's a lot of other businesses I could get into and probably apply my work ethic and my intellect and probably not take as much risk. I mean, at the end of the day, I think most general contractors are at around 3% net profit.
Mm-hmm.
And that can go, I mean, one bad job, one bad thing happens and bam, that's gone, right? So I think most people that are in this field are in this field because it's a calling, because they love to build. And, you know, you got to get good at it so you can make money at it. This goes for anything, but, you know, so that's why I think it's a calling. It's what I love to do. Could I do something else and be more successful, make more money? Probably, but I don't want to.
Yeah, and you wouldn't be happy that.
Right.
And I've been there. I've done that other thing, that I've gone down the other path. Like, this is what I should do. You should get into. In my case, it was, you should get into the corporate world, get back where you belong, working for big companies out of the mud, and working for doing work for Fortune 50 companies. And I did it, and it's not what I was supposed to be doing. I wasn't called to do that. It sucks to be somewhere you're not supposed to be. Doesn't matter how much money you make. You get past a certain point where you're covering your needs, and then the money just doesn't really make enough of a difference. It doesn't cover the gap. That's been my experience. So that's good stuff. I appreciate that.
But you got to try a few things too, right? Like,
Yeah.
if I'd have never tried the mechanical engineering route, or even, you know, I had a couple internships, and that's when I kind of knew, okay, these little 9-month gigs or 3-month gigs in the summer, not finding what I, you know, just really isn't calling to me. I'm not enjoying it, right? So I knew right away when I graduated. I mean, I still explored my opportunities, but I knew construction, or I felt that construction was my calling, so I went that route. But it was these, you know, it was big construction companies, big projects, things like that. And honestly, when I quit, I wanted to go make homes. But point being, you gotta try things. If you'd never got into the corporate world, you could be sitting here saying, man, I don't know if this is really my calling. I could be working, you know, the the easy job and not evenings. I'm sure you work all kinds of weird hours, but you got to try things, and it's okay. Try things, fail at things, or find out you don't like them. But the one thing I would say though is stick with it long enough. Any job you're gonna hate it, or it's gonna be a struggle for at least 6 to 12 months, because you don't even know what you're supposed to be doing, much less whether you're doing a good job or not. So have enough fortitude to stick with it for a period of time and go through the pain to understand the job. But when you do figure out it's not your calling, you know, go ahead and make a change. But try lots of things. You got to try things.
Yeah, I think I heard somebody say it's okay to put down a book midway through and not finish it. And same thing with a business. If something's not working or a job, you're not making lifetime decisions here. Just try it. And what I found is, I think there's something to this whole idea of calling. I think there's if you get into your calling, then you're going to have to, as you said, be willing to persevere. You're going to have to be willing to do it poorly for a while, struggle, succeed a little bit, struggle some more, and be willing to just persist and pass the persistence test. And I think if you decide what you're going to do and then you stick with it, if you're willing to stick with something for 2 years. I've interviewed people. I interviewed a lady on here a couple of years ago. She started her business. She knew that's what she wanted to do. She actually she worked for Victoria's Secret. All right. And her name was Jean Fajeda. She grew up in Brazil, I think, moved to America, got into the corporate world, decided she was going to start a construction company. 2 years she bid on projects, zero success, but she decided she was going to be successful and she just didn't quit. I think that's a skill. If you just don't quit.
Absolutely.
Just be too dumb to quit sometimes.
Yeah, persistence is definitely a key, especially if you're like me and you're not afraid of. And I've had those moments in my career. I remember, early in my career when I was still doing less than probably $200,000 or $300,000 a year and struggling to find business, struggling to make money at it. And I told my wife, "Why am I doing this? I could go get an engineering job." And she's like, "Oh, why would you quit now?" And in my mind too, I'm saying, well, I've learned all these lessons. If I don't continue to apply them, then that 5 years prior where I struggled to make money was a waste, or 2 years prior was a waste. If I take everything I've learned and apply it and persist and persevere, then I can be successful. And I've taken a couple of those steps in my career. That was, getting into residential, and then I was very successful when we started doing apartments. And then as soon as if you talk about overhead creep, I don't know if you ever talked about that on your podcast, but overhead creep got a hold of me, man. And I thought I was making great money. I had everything figured out. And all of a sudden I started hiring people, and all of a sudden we weren't making any money. Well, that overhead creep got a hold of me. And then we had that rough project in 2018. And I said, man, I don't know if this is for me, or I don't know if my banking and bonding partners are going to stick with me, which is make it difficult to be successful. But worked hard, persevered, and had a great year in 2019. Should have a good 2020. I'm trying to learn and not take such big bites of the apple that I have those catastrophic failures, but we're still pushing hard. So.
Yep. Yeah. It's like pilots say, any landing you can walk away from is a good landing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, that's good advice. Just stick with it. One last question for you about advice, and then we'll land this thing. I can remember when I was in college, there was my first boss was Martin Pfister, and he gave me some great advice that I didn't listen to. We were going through the drive-through at McDonald's. He's trying to convince me to come work for him in a small business instead of working for a big company. And that was some of the best advice. He gave me some of the best advice that I didn't take. So I'm curious, what is some of the best advice you've ignored in your career?
I don't think I can think of a specific one. It probably is saying no more. People tell me to say no more. I think that, I don't know if it was 2008, that time where I had to get every job I bid, that makes me really hesitant to walk away from any opportunity. That's probably what it is. I still chase, as another coach of mine that helps me on my accounting side tells me, I'm a shiny object guy, right? So I tend to chase a lot of shiny objects, and I continue to do that to this day. Probably pursue them for a little too long before I say no, or don't say no to some that I should. But at the end of the day, whether it's good advice or bad advice, you got to make your own decisions. And just because it's somebody that's wise and somebody that has a great perspective doesn't mean you always have to follow their advice too. So you need to take it all into consideration and make a decision, understanding what the consequences are going to be, and then be willing to live with whatever happens. So
yeah, that's good stuff. Good stuff. Well, I appreciate your time. I want to be cognizant of your time. If people want to connect with you, tell them the name of your company, where they can connect with you, whether it's a website, social media, any other way that they can follow what you're up to and get in touch with you.
Sure. The name of our company is now Crestone Companies. We're in Watertown, South Dakota. My name's Eric Skott again. And I'm sure you've got a resource since they can easily find you where you can put that. I'd be happy to share my email address and everything, but they're probably not going to get it off the podcast. So, I'd say the best way would be to reach out to Todd or some of his resources that he can get you in touch with me. So, is that fair, or do you want me to spit out the email address?
Sounds good. I'll put the email address and your website in the show notes for this podcast, and you can just go look there because, unless people have a much better memory than I do, it's probably just going to evaporate. So if you want to get in touch with
One
Eric,
negative to our rebranding was my email address got longer and more complicated, and it's hard to get right. So
got it. Yep. So check the show notes for that link and go reach out to Eric. Tell him thanks for being on here. And good stuff. Well, I really appreciate it, Eric. It's great to chat with you. I appreciate you sharing, and let me know if there's something I can do to help you in the future.
Yeah, likewise, Todd. I appreciate your podcast, everything I've learned from you. Recently learning how to get paid for estimates, which I think will be again, we talk about overhead creep, a great way to cover some of that creep or get it to at least, cash flow. That's a big deal. So appreciate what you do and the calling that you accepted to help improve the construction world. I've enjoyed our time coaching a few years ago and listening to your podcast. So.
I appreciate it. It's my pleasure. Hope you got something out of that. Remember, this is all about implementation. It's all about implementation. So my advice, my challenge for you would be to pick one thing that really stood out to you from this interview, one thing that you picked up from Eric, and implement it. Put it to work. Hit pause right now if you have to. Write it down in your unicorn journal, whatever you have to do, but implement it. Put this stuff to work. One of the best things that I can advise you to do is to end the practice of free estimates. If you are ready to end the practice of free estimates, then head over to buildermasterclass.com/script to get the 3 questions you can ask on your next appointment to get them and maybe even yourself to see the value in paying you for your pre-construction and estimating services. That's buildermasterclass.com/script. Don't send out another free estimate until you watch this video and get these questions. These links are all available in the show notes if you need them. One more question. Let me ask you this. How does your strategy for 2021 look? Do you have 3 specific goals that you want to target? At least 3 specific goals. What is the number one obstacle that you need to overcome in 2021? What's the number one opportunity that you want to capitalize on? Where's your business going? What does winning look like for 2021? If you're like a lot of construction business owners, you're so busy doing the day-to-day stuff that maybe you haven't had time or you haven't taken the time. You're not going to find it, but you haven't taken the time to do strategic planning. This is a great time of the year to do that so that you can jump on 2021. I have a strategic planning guide that I'd like to get in your hands if you would like some help putting together your strategic plan to identify some goals, identify the obstacles, identify the risks, identify the opportunities so that you can jump on 2021. If you send me an email in the month of December, by the end of December 2020, just send me an email in the subject line, planning guide. Just let me know you're looking for the planning guide. Send that email to todd@constructionleadingedge.com. I'll send you the free 7-page PDF strategic planning guide that I put together, and I think it'll help you. So send me an email, todd@constructionleadingedge.com by the end of December 2020. If you're listening to this in the future, sorry, but this is a short time, limited time offer. Just send me an email, todd@constructionleadingedge.com, and I'll get you that free 7-page PDF strategic planning guide. I think it's 7 pages, but it's not very long. It's going to help you. And as always, if you could leave a rating and or a review for this podcast. That would mean a lot to me. That also helps get the word out there to everyone else. And as always, thank you so much. You can get more resources at buildermasterclass.com, or you can go to my main website, constructionleadingedge.com. You can also schedule a call with me there if you need some help with your business, strategic planning, overcoming obstacles, whatever that might be. Schedule a free call with me by going to constructionleadingedge.com, clicking the red button that says schedule a free call. As always, thank you so much for listening. I will see you next time. LL Flooring offers over 400 floors in both the latest styles and timeless looks, from hardwood and laminate to waterproof flooring. There's a floor for any style and every budget. Visit the experts at your local store or go to llflooring.com/pro. These are the floors homes are built on.